The green peach aphid is a major pest within Australia. It primarily attacks canola crops, but also gets into winter pulses. And of course, it's an important pest in horticulture as well.
Green peach aphids are hemipteran pests. They are the most common aphids we will find in crops in early autumn when winged adults fly into the crop. And they can establish and grow in really large numbers, especially if the conditions are relatively mild and warm. They grow up to 3 millimeters in size. Their color ranges from pale yellow-green to bright green, orange, or pink, and we'll usually find them in clumps on the underside of canola leaves. Some of the most important actions you can take are actually prior to sowing. You can use the resources on GRDC website to assess your risk of green peach aphids. And there are some things you can do, such as making sure to get rid of green bridges at least 14 days prior to sowing. You can try and delay sowing as much as possible to reduce that risk of green peach aphids coming in and infecting and building up in your crop in these early vulnerable stages.
At sowing, insecticide seed treatments are an important strategy for green peach aphids, but it's really important to keep in mind that there is growing cases of insecticide resistance to many of the seed treatments that we use. So even when seed treatments are used, it's really important to continue to monitor those crops for the presence of the aphids. And if possible, sowing into standing stubble is another important cultural control strategy that can help during that early crop establishment period. Once the crop gets out of the ground, monitoring is really important. If we're out there looking for aphids, we should also be looking for the presence of virus symptoms. And later in the season, it's also trying to understand, are there any non-target effects when using those insecticides? So we want to be thinking about chemicals ideally that are selective and not having the same impact on beneficial insects, because they're an important part of our overall strategy to control green peach aphids. They're very effective in suppressing populations on their own, those beneficial insects.
Green peach aphid is the primary vector for turnip yellows virus. They can transfer the virus between canola crops and other brassicas, but also natural reservoirs that we can find in the environment, such as weeds, volunteer brassicas, and other crops. And because turnip yellows virus is most damaging to crops when it affects them at early growth stages, green peach aphids are really a big problem because they usually fly in autumn when plants are just starting to emerge and when they're extremely vulnerable to infection.
The aphids are quite unpredictable in terms of when they fly into crops and when they will be vectoring turnip yellows virus and other important plant viruses. Some of the most important factors to consider when thinking about risk are climatic conditions, particularly things like summer rainfall, which potentially will give rise to a green bridge, which enhances the plant hosts available for both the aphids but also the virus itself. The green peach aphid has evolved resistances to many insecticides globally. Unfortunately, within Australia, the green peach aphid also has evolved resistance to many of the insecticides that are currently registered in Australian grain crops, as well as in many of our horticultural crops. We have widespread resistances to many of the chemicals that growers use. At the moment, we're working with GRDC on a national project looking at the green peach aphid. This work is exploring insecticide resistance. Additionally, we're working on the movement of green peach aphid chemical and non-chemical control options. GRDC has recently developed a best management practice guide for the green peach aphid. There's another resource called the Grains Beneficial Chemical Toxicity Table. This is a fantastic way to identify the impacts of a whole range of insecticides that are registered in Australian grain crops on beneficial insects. We know that the beneficial insects are a key part of aphid control, in particular green peach aphid control. And so understanding the impacts of the various insecticides is a really important step forwards in taking more of a holistic way to manage this particular species.